So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Elden Ring Nightreign's first paid DLC, The Forsaken Hollows, dropped a few days ago for 15 bucks, and the community reaction has been, let's say, complicated. We got mixed reviews on Steam, sitting around 46% positive, which, if you know From Software track record, that's kind of rough territory. But here's the thing, after putting in a couple hours with this expansion, playing through both the new characters, fighting the new bosses, and exploring every corner of the Great Hollow, I've got some thoughts, and they're not as simple as good or bad. So here's my full breakdown of the Forsaken Hollows. We're going to talk about what works, what doesn't, and whether it's worth your money, and most importantly, whether if it gives Nightreign the shot in the arm that it needed 6 months after the launch. No fluff, no corporate talking points, just real talk about what the DLC brings to the table. Let's get the basics out of the way first. The Forsaken Hollow gives you two new playable Nightfarers, their Scholar and the Undertaker, along with a brand new shifting Earth event called the Great Hollow, two new expedition bosses, and a handful of new field encounters and points of interest scattered throughout the Limville. On paper, that sounds pretty solid for 15 bucks, especially if you consider the base game's launch at 40. But context matter here. This DLC costs more than a third of the base game's price, and when you compare the content volume, the ratio doesn't quite add up. This is more of a focused, compact edition. The question is whether what's here justifies the price tag, and that answer is going to vary wildly depending on what you're looking for. For me personally, jumping back into Nightreign after taking a break felt refreshing. The gameplay's loop is tight enough that the new variables can really shake things up, and both the Scholar and the Undertaker change how you approach expeditions in meaningful ways. But I also can't ignore the elephant in the room here. There are some head-scratching omissions here that have left a lot of players feeling shortchanged. Let's talk about the stars of the show, the Undertaker and the Scholar, because honestly, these two characters are where the Forsaken Hollows really delivered. The Undertaker is basically From Software saying, what if we made a strength faith build that plays like it's on crack? She's an abbess wielding a hammer, and her entire kit revolves around maintaining aggressive posture while having a surprisingly slippery mobility. Her trance ability lets her sprint without consuming stamina, increase her toughness, and amps up her combo damage, but here's where things get interesting. If you pop the trance with a full ultimate gauge, you get enhanced trance with even higher attack power, faster movement, and the ability to shrug off one lethal. It's basically Wilder's second chance mechanic built into a pure damage dealer. Then there's her ultimate, Loathsome Hex. She rockets into an enemy, deals a massive stagger damage, and creates this insane synergy with the rest of your team. See, whenever an ally uses their ultimate, the Undertaker can immediately use hers for free, not a reduced cost, completely for free. So if you're running with multiple Undertakers or coordinating with a team that knows what they're doing, you can chain ultimates back to back like you're breaking the game. I've had runs where we just deleted the boss's health bars in seconds because we were timing our ults perfectly. It's an absurd in the best possible way. The Scholar, on the other hand, is complete opposite. He's a support character that requires actual brain cells to play efficiently, which is probably why you're seeing way fewer people pick him up. The Scholar has insane arcane scaling. We're talking a base of 50 arcane that stays consistent throughout his early levels. His whole thing is battlefield awareness and debuff application through his study ability. Here's how it works. You analyze enemies to apply buffs or buff yourself and allies within a circle, but you're vulnerable while doing it because you literally lower your weapon to study. It's a risk reward system that forces you to pick your moments carefully. When it works though, you're applying damage negation buffs, sharing damage between enemies, and turning consumables into team-wide buffs. Like you can level up a boiled prawn so it not only gives more physical damage resistance but also increases maximal health. Then share that effect with the entire party through certain relics. What I love about the Scholar is that he rewards the game knowledge and smart play. You're not just another damage dealer, you're actively thinking about resource managing, position, team synergy. But I'm not gonna lie, this feels kind of lackluster when you're playing solo unless you're really committed to a specific build. His stat spread is weird too, amazing arcane, but everything else suffers. He's built for bleed and frost builds, and if you lean into that with the right relics, he can pump some serious damage. There's a learning curve here that a lot of players aren't going to want to deal with. The real move From Software made with these characters is differentiation. The basic Nightreign roster was solid, but everyone kind of filled their similar roles with slight variation. The Undertaker, the Scholar feel genuinely different from anything else in the game. One is a hyper-aggressive ultimate chaining machine, the other is a thinking player support class. They both expand the technical option available to the teams in ways that actually matter. Now let's talk about the new Shifting Earth event, because this is where the options get really divided. The Great Hollow is essentially a completely new map that triggers when you use the Sovereign Coins to force the event. And I want to be clear about something. This isn't Limville with some changes. This is a full underground area with its own structure, objectives, and environmental hazards. First impression is gorgeous. The atmosphere hits you immediately with an oppressive underground vibe. Giant crystals everywhere, ancient ruins drop, vertical drops that'll make your stomach drop. From Software clearly took inspiration from Shadow Erdtree's approach to verticality and said, let's crank that to 11. And for the most part, that works. The scale of this place is impressive, especially considering its content. But here's where things get tricky. The Great Hollow is designed around a central objective. You need to resonate with 4 giant crystals to remove a curse before you can tackle the mysterious tower at the center. That tower itself is packed with challenging bosses and offers a fitting reward at the top. The problem is the path getting there. The map has death drops everywhere, and I mean everywhere. You're constantly navigating narrow paths, jumping between broken crystal pillars, and trying to figure out which ledges are actual platforms and which ones are just decoration. I watched my teammates fall to their deaths more times in Great Hollow than the entire base of the game. Some of that is a learning curve. You figure out the routes, you memorize the safe pass, but some of it is generally frustrating level design that feels more punishing than challenging. The verticality is a double-edged sword on its own. On the one hand, it creates a sense of scale and exploration that Nightreign hasn't had before. You're constantly looking up and down, planning routes, using sprint and springs strategically. On the other hand, the game's traveling mechanics weren't really built for this kind of environment. You'll find yourself getting stuck on geometry, misjudging jumps, or getting caught by the Night's Tide while desperately trying to climb a cliff. And then there's the curse mechanic. In certain areas of the Great Hollow, your maximum HP gets cut in half until you resonate with those crystals. Combined with stronger enemies and the constant threat of falling to your death, it creates this oppressive difficulty that either feels thrilling or tedious depending on your mood. I grew to appreciate the map more over time once I learned the optimal routes and understood the flow of the objectives, but the initial learning period was rough, and I can absolutely understand why some players are bouncing off hard from it. Here's my take after a couple hours. The Great Hollow is ambitious level design that doesn't always work in Nightreign's favor. It's trying to do something different, and I really do respect that, but the execution is inconsistent. When you're flowing through it with the team that knows routes, hitting your objectives efficiently, it feels really great. The other issue is repetition. Unlike Limville, which has multiple shifting Earth events to mix things up, the Great Hollow is just one fixed map with one fixed objective loop, and that loop often takes both nights to complete rather than just one. So if you're farming for the new content, you're going to be running into the same map over and over. That gets old faster than the rotating events in the base game. Let's talk about why you're really here, the new boss fights. The Forsaken Hollow gives you 2 new expedition bosses. The Balancers and the Dreglord both are accessible after you unlock the new Nightfarers and defeated at least 2 Night Lords, including Gladius. The Balancers are basically Valkyrie-style warriors, and the fight is all about enemy management and positioning. You're dealing with multiple targets that need to be controlled and mechanics that punish sloppy gameplay. The encounter features impressive cinematic skill with unmatched background music. From my experience, this fight is harder than the Dreglord purely because there's multitasking involved. You need to be aware of what each Valkyrie is doing, manage the ads, and coordinate with your team on the focused targets. It's chaotic in the classic From Software way, where everything is happening at once and you need to stay sharp. The Dreglord is a different beast entirely and literally. This is a pure damage check boss that hits like a truck. We're talking AoEs, fast combos, rot damage, and very little room for error. My first clear was actually on the first try, but here's the thing. We were completely juiced up to the extreme. We had just come from clearing Nadio, and our builds were optimized with legendaries, and we basically burst him down before he could come overwhelm us. The second time I fought him with a different group, we got absolutely demolished because we weren't as prepared. Both bosses are challenging in different ways, and I appreciate that from Software that just didn't recycle mechanics. The Balancers test your awareness and the coordination. The Dreglord tests your damage output and dodging precision. They feel appropriately different for DLC content, and maybe a notch above the base game toughness encounters, but not unfair. We also got some returning faces with new twists. From Dark Souls 1 got a complete overhaul, and he's generally menacing. The fight has more mechanics and to accommodate 3 players, and there's an incredible animation where he impales you with his sword, holds you up in the air, and just ragdolls you before throwing you away. It's brutal and spectacular at the same time. Mog is back too, and the Demon Prince shows up unhinged from Dark Souls 3. Then there are 3 new invasion events, and this is where things get a little bit messy. We got 3 new ones, Gladius, Caliggo, and a third that I won't spoil. Gladius sets the air on fire, slowly draining your health until you track down and kill 3 separate bodies in different locations. The problem is if you don't finish them off quickly, you're stuck with fairy dogs consistently spawning and attacking you, and their damage is no joke. For solo players especially, this is a massive time sink with mediocre rewards. Caliggo manifests an icy fog and takes a nap while enemies assault you. If he spawns in the Great Hollow, visibility drops to 0. I had a run where I had sprint, jump, and had no idea where I was landing because of the fog. Combined with frame rate drops during this event, it becomes more annoying than challenging. These invasion events need more polish before release. Here's where we need to address the biggest complaint about the Forsaken Hollow: the complete lack of new weapons, and I mean complete. The DLC adds only 2 signature weapons for the new characters, basic reskins for a hammer and a thrust sword, and that's it. No Shadow of Erdtree weapons, no new weapon types for the existing classes, no additional variety beyond what the Undertaker and the Scholar come with out of the box. For a roguelike where build variety and experimentation are core to the experience, this is baffling. Why wouldn't you port over some of the incredible weapons from Shadow of Erdtree? Why not give us 10 or 15 new options to play with? The community has been asking for this since the base game has launched. From Software clearly had the ability to bring over content from previous games. We literally have Dark Souls bosses and enemies in this DLC, but weapons, radio silence in this. Every class could have benefited from new options, especially the older Nightfarers who players have already exhausted most of the combinations with. The new relics are cool. The fact that every base game classic gets a new vessel for Deep of Night is appreciated, but relics modify existing. They don't fundamentally change how you play a character the way a new weapon does. When you're paying for almost half price of the base game for DLC, the expectation is that you're getting meaningful content across the board, not just selected areas. I do want to be clear, this isn't about being entitled or demanding. This is about understanding what makes a roguelike engaging long term. Weapons are loot. Loot is what keeps you running expeditions. When you remove that variable from the equation, you're asking players to be satisfied with the same gear that they've been using for 6 months, just in slightly different figurations. That's not enough. We need to talk about the swamps as well, because yes, From Software added swamps to Nightreign, both in Great Hollow and scattered throughout Limville. These areas are slow movement and build up poison, scarlet rot, frenzy, and other ailments if players stay in them too long. And look, I know poison swamps is From Software meme at this point. Director Junichi Shizaki acknowledged the awareness of the meme, noting that there's no strict rule about swamps, but they just seem to be organically appearing during the development. Honestly, in Nightreign's content, that actually works pretty well. This is a game about navigation, time management, and risk assessment. Adding environmental hazards that force you to make split decisions about whether to push through or find alternate routes fits the gameplay loop. The swamps aren't just damage zones, they're tactical obstacles. Do you risk the rot drop buildup to save time? Do you waste consumables clearing the status effects? Do you take the long way around and potentially run into the night tide? These are interesting questions that add texture to runs without feeling overly punishing. Plus, the visual design of these areas is solid. They're creepy, atmospheric, and they make you feel like you're venturing into the generally dangerous territory. Performance polish and technical issues, though, I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't mention the technical side. The Forsaken Hollows had some performance problems, especially in the Great Hollow during certain invasion events. Caliggo's fog in particular tanks the frame rates on some systems, and I've heard some reports of crashing during boss encounters. Though I personally didn't experience that, the depth drops in the Great Hollow also revealed some questionable collision detection. There were times that I'd be running along with what looked like a solid ground only to suddenly fall through the world. Other times that I catch myself on invisible ledges that shouldn't exist. It's not game breaking, but it's noticeable enough to be annoying. Load times are generally fine, matchmaking seems stable, and I didn't encounter any major bugs outside of the occasional physics freak out. But the frame rate issues during specific events need to be addressed because they can generally get you killed in a game where split seconds matter. All right, let's get into the heart of it. Should you buy Forsaken Hollows? And this is where I need to be honest with you about who this DLC is actually for. If you love Nightreign and you've been hungry for an excuse to just jump back in, and then yes, this is worth the $15. The two Nightfarers are generally fun to play, the new bosses are challenging and memorable, and the Great Hollow offers a fresh environment to learn and master. You're going to get your money's worth in terms of hours played, especially if you're the type of person who likes to min-max builds and experiment with different combinations. But if you're hoping for something that would massively expand Nightreign's scope of or address the fundamental issues with late game content variety, you're going to be disappointed. This is more Nightreign, not better Nightreign. It's additive rather than a transformative. The lack of new weapons is a legitimate problem that impacts the long-term engagement, and the Great Hollow design issues turn off players who are already frustrated with the Nightreign's roguelike structure. For solo players specifically, I'm less confident about the value here. The new bosses and invasion events are clearly designed with co-op in mind, and while you can absolutely solo everything if you're skilled enough, the experience is significantly less enjoyable. The Scholar especially feels underutilized when you're playing alone, and the Great Hollow objective system works much better when you can split up and cover more ground efficiently. $15 isn't a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but it's also not nothing. If you're on the fence, I'd wait for a sale or wait to see what From Software does with the future updates. The developers' post-launch support will need some significant work too to make good sense. If you're a diehard Nightreign fan who's going to be playing regardless, go for it. You'll have fun with what's there. Here's something that generally makes me sad. This is reportedly the last major update for Nightreign, and I think that's a mistake. The game has so much underutilized potential. The co-op foundation is strong, the core gameplay loop is addictive, and the From Software polish is evident in every enemy encounter and boss fight, but it needs more time to breathe, more content to explore, more reasons to come back. The Forsaken Hollow feels like From Software testing the waters rather than just going all in. It's competent, occasionally inspired, but ultimately conservative. I wanted this to take risks, to push Nightreign into new directions, to give us mechanics and system that made us rethink how we approach expeditions. Instead, we got more of the same with a couple of new characters, a map that's frustrating as it is impressive, but I also want to acknowledge what From Software accomplished here. Director Ishizaki mentioned the DLC was developed with tight schedules and limited resources, with the team pushing to create something special despite constraints. And you can feel that ambition in the final product, even if the execution doesn't always stick the landing. The Undertaker's ultimate chaining is generally innovative, and the Scholar support mechanics add a strategic depth. The Great Hollow attempts at something different with level design. These are good ideas that deserved more development time resources. I hope From Software takes the lessons from Nightreign and applies them in future projects. A live service adjacent co-op Souls game is an incredible concept that could have legs for years with proper support, but it needs commitment, it needs content pipeline, it needs a development team that understands what makes a roguelike sticks with players long term. The Forsaken Hollows prove From Software can do this, it just needs to decide if it wants to. Listen, I generally enjoyed my time with the Forsaken Hollows, playing as the Undertaker and chaining my alts at bosses into oblivion while my team was some of the most fun that I've had in Nightreign. Learning the Great Hollow's routes and finally pulling off the clean runs felt satisfying. The new bosses gave me that classic From Software challenge that I kept coming back for. This DLC reminded me why I like Nightreign in the first place. But I just can't ignore the problems. The lack of the weapons hurt, the Great Hollow designs frustrates as often as it impresses me, the invasion events needs more iteration, the price to content ratio feels off compared to the other From Software expansions, and the realization that this is probably the last major addition to Nightreign leaves me wanting more. If you're a Nightreign fan, you're probably going to pick this up regardless of what I say, and you'll probably have a good time with it. Just go with realistic expectation. This is solid but not a spectacular addition to the game that deserves spectacular. It's worth playing, but it's not gonna blow your mind. For everyone else, I say proceed with caution. If you already finished everything in the base game and moved on, the Forsaken Hollows probably isn't going to get you pulled back in for more than just a weekend. But if you're actively playing Nightreign and looking for fresh content, this is worthwhile investment that'll give you another 10 or 15 hours of quality gameplay. So that's my full take on Elden Ring Nightreign The Forsaken Hollows. Two fantastic new Nightfarers with generally interesting mechanics, a beautiful and frustrating new map that needs more polish, two challenging bosses bosses that deliver on spectacle, and some of the baffling omissions that hold the whole package from being great. It's a mixed bag where it reflects both From Software creative strengths and occasionally disconnect with what players actually want. I'm going to keep playing this DLC because I legitimately enjoy what's here and I want to master both new characters, but I'm also going to keep hoping that From Software changes their mind about this being the final major update. Nightreign deserves better. It deserves to reach its full potential, and the Forsaken Hollows, for all of its flaws, proves that the potential is still there waiting to be realized. If you want to see me play more gameplay or watch me suffer through the Great Hollow death drops or just hang out while I try to learn the Scholar support mechanics, I stream all of that over on Twitch. Link is in the description. I'll be running through more content, experimenting with builds, and probably falling off a lot of cliffs. It'll be a great time, so come join. But thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe out there, Nightfarers, because From Software clearly isn't going to make it easy for you. Catch you in the next one.